The Amazing Spider-Man 2 back in 2014 left a lot of Spider-Man fans feeling disappointed or even outraged. But the biggest lie would come later. There were some like myself who found the film, despite a few flaws that were obviously shoehorned in by the studio, find The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to not only be emotional, but funny, entertaining, action-packed, high stakes, and truly an amazing film. No, that is not clickbait. This is not someone drastically altering their opinion to try and trick you into questioning your own or get clicks. This is my honest, maybe slightly stupid or psychotic, but honest opinion as to why The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has been wrongfully conceived as the worst Spider-Man movie for almost the last decade. Why Andrew Garfield was born to play Spider-Man just as much as the other two, maybe even more so. First off, in storytelling, there's few things more important than having good music. And although the first Amazing Spider-Man film had a never-forgettable score from James Horner, this time Hans Zimmer takes the reins and does a fantastic job. I kinda even prefer it. I don't know. I do know it gets stuck in my head a lot. Although one thing is for certain, we have yet to have a Spider-Man movie that has had a bad score. I personally love Electro's theme in this film and at times thought, yeah, it was a little cheese maybe when it's like singing or singing along with the movie, but super fun. Not to mention actually had an intimidating feel to it as well. So much so they reused it for Spider-Man No Way Home. Although they decided for that film to reuse James Horner's theme for Spidey, probably to pay respects to the man. He was a legend after all. That doesn't, however, take anything away from the great work Hans Zimmer did for Spidey as well. It perfectly segues into what I think might be my favorite swinging scene in a Spider-Man movie. When Spider-Man is free-falling, like he was me or you playing as Spider-Man in a video game, and we just got to, the biggest building or our favorite view, and then jump off straight down and hit swing last second right before he hit the ground. And that's what it felt like, just opening scene to this movie after, the plane crash. And it was a genius way to kick off a badass intro. That's not taking anything away from the Raimi films, because I love all three. Yup, even 3. But that's for another time, webheads. By the way, thank you for watching this video, and if you have made it this far, consider subscribing to the channel to never miss another video like this. I kinda do think Paul Giamatti's Rhino is good, but in a hilariously bad kinda way. Hear me out. I know Paul Giamatti's performance in this movie is literally the Webster's Dictionary definition of a cartoon, but to me, it did the one thing that was important. It made me smile. Was it due to being cartoony or over the top or a complete misrepresentation of a Russian gangster in a rhino mechanical suit? Yes. Small doses of ridiculousness can make you appreciate the more grounded elements later and not get drowned down by them or choked by them. Speaking of choked, this Spider-Man has the perfect quips and jokes to match any adversary that comes his way, no matter how impactful or ridiculous. Not just the banter between Spider-Man and his foes, though, but obviously between Peter and Gwen, but also Peter and Aunt May. And Sally Fields is the absolute best when it comes to Aunt May, even though she's not the one I grew up with, and she might not be the one you grew up with, and she might not give me that sweet grandma vibe from Rosemary Harris's Aunt May in the Raimi films, but a true aunt-nephew dynamic that transformed over the years with love and, yeah, also humor. Sally Fields fucking rocks. I know she didn't love making these films, but she's a huge part as to why they work so well, and her chemistry with Garfield is the best. Her fear of losing her boy, because he's looking into the past that got his father and his mother killed, the past that made his parents disappear in the first place. A blessing to her because she was given a new life, raising Peter, purpose, love, happiness, but also a curse, knowing she could never fill the hole that was left inside him with his parents' absence. Maybe it's not the most entertaining or action-packed storyline you could have had in a Spider-Man film, but it's a relatable human one. It's the human moments in the movie that remind the audience that even when Peter slows down time for us, we are all so fragile that the slightest mistake, even being off by an inch on something, could cause massive deaths. The film reminds us from the very beginning the stakes and repercussions from the last film, with the failed promise and the haunting that Peter feels from that, is constantly present. A shadow hanging over the movie, reminding the audience Peter should have listened. Or should he have? If he had abandoned Gwen and let her live her life without him, then he would have never lived his life knowing what could have been and never lived feeling that fulfillment. Although breaking the promise gets Gwen killed, so chicken, egg, either way, Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, Peter and Gwen Stacy is one of the strongest comic book relationship adaptations we have seen on screen. Because when you stop to think about Batman's, Hulk's, Daredevil's, Thor's, or any on-screen love interest super couple, it's hard to think of a better captured example of on-screen chemistry than Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy with Garfield's Peter Parker. All of these stories and conversations could never be had about some of the comic book films that have came out in the last couple years. Certainly some of them, but not all. And although there are tons of flaws, this film is far from generic. It does tip its toe into desperately wanting to set up a future cinematic universe, sure, with a few scenes, including the ending shot, that I actually did think added some value to the film, but unfortunately was the main advertising for the film, so it made sticking around to the end of the movie feel like a bit of deja vu. This by far, though, had a great potential for a third film with the Sinister Six or not. They could have even gone where everyone else is going, multiverse, and go and find, you guessed it, Spider-Gwen. I personally loved the idea of seeing a Spider-Man move to Europe to be with Gwen, even if it was just for some time in college. It could have opened the door for some different possibilities and would have been a nice change from the normal NYC. Although they did kind of go down that route a little bit with Spider-Man Far From Home, they didn't quite lean into it as much as I personally would have wanted. Who knows? That multiverse door opened once for Garfield's Amazing Spider-Man to return. Could it for Emma Stone? Okay, so I know a lot of you are probably going to fight me on this video and some of my reasonings, which I don't even know if it's possible to fit all of your reasonings into one video that's still somewhat digestible in length. But as much as it might be polarizing for some of you to think that there is somebody out there that actually does love and appreciate almost everything about this movie and easily was one of my favorite movie-going experiences, I still enjoy all of the other Spider-Man films as well, and as much as this movie might have been trying to introduce us to way too much too fast, I think it pulled it off in strides. I know I'm going to get killed for this, but I've always liked Electro in this movie as well. Sure, Max is a little bit of Edward Nygma in Batman Forever, but I think it makes his transformation actually a little more relatable. He was never a dude that wanted to be a big-time CEO or big hotshot millionaire. He just wanted to be seen and for his voice to be heard, just like so many of us. He actually shows fear multiple times after he discovers his powers, and I can't help but feel bad for him at times, even as he gets what he wants, which is all the attention, all the cameras pointed at him. He still can't accept it and be happy with it, and after some quick confusion, there's a big explosive fight in the middle of Times Square, which, if I'm being completely honest, is one of my favorite Spider-Man action sequences, with the lightning and electricity becoming part of the entire city and surroundings while Spider-Man is saving an entire group of people from barbecuing themselves. This by far at the time was the most different Spider-Man villain we had gotten powers-wise, which seems like in every new Spider-Man movie, they do a pretty good job of giving us something new with their villains. Sure, Jamie Foxx wasn't given anything revolutionary to do in this movie, but he was far greater than serviceable, even if he doesn't say so. Also, hope he's doing better. Yeah, so Dane DeHaan is my least favorite Goblin, and I think every comic book fan going into the movie knew if Goblin is anywhere near Gwen during the third act that she was probably toast, and she was a goner. That, however, does not make up as much of the movie-going audience as we might think. As for instance, my sister, massive Spider-Man fan all her life, but has never read a comic, so she had no idea that Gwen was going to die. I understand that some people thought it was rushed or forced or whatever, but for people like my sister, even for people like me who suspected it might be coming, that Gwen Stacy, the love of Peter Parker's life, could actually bite the bullet in this movie, something no Spider-Man movie had done before. And it was a shock to the massive general going audience. It was the loudest, quiet moment in any comic book movie before. The deafening gasp of the theater as the film went silent was a noise I will always remember. It's a noise not heard often. When something unthinkably awful and horrific happens in a movie that, has had darker themes throughout the movie and elements of time and death, but it also had moments of joy, love, laughter, action. So to think a Spider-Man movie could do that, I was amazed. Specifically with Andrew Garfield's performance during the aftermath and that damn nasty head smash. It was horrific, sudden, and beautiful all at once. Gwen's speech at the end, as well as Aunt May's love and support, got Peter to take one last look and to say goodbye, but we know he never truly could, right? Like so many of us, he carried his pain with him and often turned it into anger as he stopped pulling his punch-ins. I don't know if we need a darker Spider-Man movie than this one. I mean, this movie has got some ridiculous Russian rhino stuff, and then it also has some really beautiful messages about time and life and love, mixed in with some powerful acting from our leads and introduced to some new ideas. Hell, a lot of new ideas coming out of this universe is Oscorp, but I think it was a massively wasted opportunity to cancel this franchise and reboot once again after your first stumble. I'm sorry, but I love the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, and if Sony had higher expectations than what that film gave them, then what were they honestly expecting? They gave audiences a reboot when they wanted Spider-Man 4. Of course people were going to be pissed. It was just like when Henry Cavill was cast instead of Brandon Routh or Tom Welling, and look how that turned out. Granted, we wouldn't have Tom Holland's Spider-Man or the inclusion of his character in the MCU or have Spider-Man No Way Home, but we know eventually they would have rebooted after the planned Amazing Spider-Verse had run its course. Don't get me wrong, I love the MCU and all three Spideys, but if the MCU rebooted after Iron Man 2, we would have had a very different outlook on Marvel in general. The same could be said for the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, as well as Andrew Garfield in the role. Also, P.S. This deleted scene made more sense to include in a slightly different version of the movie, sure, but damn man, Garfield's acting right after Gwen's death here is on point.
I am your father, Peter. I want you just to listen to me.
My father is dead.
Peter, listen to me.
He's dead! Who are you?
I had to disappear.
Not to mention, we kind of get a new rendition of the whole with great power comes great responsibility line in the first Amazing Spider-Man from Uncle Ben, which was slightly different than the original line delivery in the first Spider-Man movie, but of course it was never going to be able to top the original. However, the inclusion of Peter's father being alive and saying the line in a way comes full circle with not only this movie, but Peter's life as well as Uncle Ben. But I digress. The biggest lie is that this is the worst Spider-Man movie. This is a fun, warm, action-packed, yet dark emotional ride. The biggest lie is that Andrew Garfield was a bad Spider-Man or too cool to be Peter Parker. I'm sorry. Just because you skate doesn't mean you were considered cool. maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, like if Tobey Maguire's Peter was skating down the halls, that would feel weird. But it doesn't to me for Andrew's, and it wouldn't for me for Tom's either. But hey, that's just me. Thanks for watching. If you wanted to get more videos like this, then let me know down in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And until the next video, see ya.
With great power comes great responsibility.